what's up? Excuse me. Hey, what's up? I'm Channel Pup Fanboy Supervillain. Shadow Generations looks freaking awesome. It just looks like Sonic Team really locked in, knew exactly what they wanted to make, knew exactly what we wanted to see from this project, and have been delivering on all fronts. The game's not out yet, as of recording this video, but there's never been a point in the production cycle where I've doubted this one. This has to be some of the strongest marketing a Sonic game has had in the past, say, 15 years. But why is that? What makes the marketing of Shadow Generations so different to the Sonic games we've had before? Well, you betcha that's what today's video is going to be all about. Subscribe, patron, super appreciated, thank you, I love you. So my thesis statement is that while many other Sonic games over the past 15 years have openly presented similarities to popular games at the time in their marketing and presentation, Shadow Generations leans into what makes this IP unique from their contemporaries. Advertising an experience you're just not going to get in other franchises. And to back that up, let's take a look at some examples from over the decades. Like a Sonic marketing generations, if you will. So back in the 1990s, Sega were very upfront with their intentions for Sonic in the marketing. Sonic was a troublemaker of the gaming industry. He was there to disrupt the peace. With Sonic, Sega were taking on the biggest target they possibly could with Mario, and the advertisements made that rivalry clear as day.
Gotta go.
Hey, guy, you're the first serious gamer I've seen all morning. Check this out. Brand new 16-bit Super Nintendo with Super Mario World. Wow!
Oh, what's this one?
Oh, this is a Sonic the Hedgehog from Sega Genesis.
I like Genesis, and it costs a lot less.
Wait, kid, that game
I'll
there.
take Sonic and Genesis.
Why can't it be more like that nice boy Mario? Little brat!
This was because in the 90s, the troublemaker archetype was incredibly popular. This was when The Simpsons was really starting to catch on, and Bart Simpson was probably the most popular character of that show in the 90s because of his rabble-rousing sensibilities. But then towards the end of the 90s and the early 2000s, as storytelling in video games became more commonplace, the Sonic franchise decided to focus more on being cinematic and a little more edgy than platforming contemporaries, and the marketing absolutely reflected that.
The military's top-secret weapon, Project Shadow, was stolen from a military base located on the deserted island in the southern seas. Sonic Adventure 2, Hero Side Story. Farewell, Sonic. Forever.
You could see a fairly steady evolution from the dramatic yin and yang farewell Sonic Forever trailers of Sonic Adventure 2 to the once again very dramatic and cinematic trailers for Sonic the Hedgehog 2006.
I've come here to obtain the secret of the plains of disaster from you, and to take the miracle gems that are the key to its secret, the Chaos Emerald. Now, Princess, this way, please.
With the only kind of outlier being, I guess, Sonic Heroes, but that was because it was more trying to establish the Sonic franchise for the third-party market, treating Sonic Heroes almost like it was the very first Sonic game since the original in 1991. Not to mention that Sonic Heroes did have a less blockbustery story than Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2 that came before it, and also Shadow the Hedgehog and Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 that came after it. But generally, this is what Sonic marketing was. That big, epic, high-intensity blockbuster. While other mascot platformers were cute and silly and fun, Sonic was really leaning into that sort of action power fantasy in his advertisement and just the way these games were presented. That's what the Sonic franchise was trying to be. That's the image it had. It was in the early 2010s, though, that things started to shift with how Sonic games were presented. Now, this obviously makes sense, as there were a lot of changes over at Sega by the end of the 2000s. In 2008, Takashi Iizuka was installed as the lead producer on the Sonic series after Yuji Naka left Sega ahead of Sonic the Hedgehog 2006's release, and Akinori Nishiyama was the lead producer on Sonic Unleashed in that interim period. Not only that, but Sega were making a conscientious effort to re-establish a positive reputation for Sonic following the critical bomb that was Sonic the Hedgehog 2006. From here, we see a new pattern emerge. Sonic would begin to not only draw inspiration from his contemporaries that he mocked in the 90s, but the marketing and presentation of these games would wear that inspiration on their sleeve. It seemingly begins with Sonic Colors. Now, I'm not at all saying that this game copies Super Mario Galaxy. From a gameplay standpoint, these two games have very little in common. However, in the run-up to the release of this one, there were critics calling Sonic Colors a Super Mario Galaxy ripoff. Gone was the cinematic action focus, with Sonic Colors being presented as more just, well, a platforming game. Gameplay showcased more blocky, side-scrolling platforming with a focus on power-ups, but the game also took place entirely in space. This was also a Wii exclusive at the time, and Super Mario Galaxy was the big Mario game for that particular console. So in this instance, Sonic was trying to appeal to fans of that particular game. Heck, when you boot the game up, you're greeted to the kind of symphonic orchestral music that the Super Mario Galaxy title boasted. I'm not at all trying to say that Super Mario Galaxy can claim ownership of space, symphonic music, platforming, and power-ups, nor have Sonic games ever shied away from these elements. However, these elements combined are synonymous with Super Mario Galaxy. They are what that game led with, and as such are also what Sonic Colors led with the marketing of this one showcasing nothing of any kind of story, none of that Sonic edge, and even the music was more of a soft pop rock than the usual hard rock that would typically be associated with Sonic. A lot of that Sonic image was kind of disappearing for Sonic Colors. Now let's move on to Sonic Lost World. If Sonic Colors flirted with Super Mario Galaxy, Sonic Lost World straight up made sweet, passionate love to it in just every possible regard, with a few Super Mario 3D World elements in there too. Immediately, the visual struck me as more Mario adjacent. While Sonic was taking on more of a cartoony aesthetic with games like Sonic Unleashed Colors and Generations, the art direction remained detailed with a tangible look to it. Sonic Lost World took on a far more plastic-like look, akin to that of Super Mario 3D World. Sonic fights monsters in this game, but they don't look like Chaos or Dark Gaia. Like, eldritch horrors and abominations, they instead look like Mario enemies. Particularly Zavok, the main villain of the game, who pulls a lot from Bowser design-wise. Badniks no longer look like threatening robots so much as plastic toys with cartoony features. The game led with its gravity-based platforming gimmicks akin to Super Mario Galaxy, while level theming was very similar to the typical Super Mario game. Fields, deserts, beaches, forests, volcanoes. Now, Sonic is no stranger to those level themes, but usually Sonic games would combine that with more world building, or you'd have some industrial areas or cities. Just something to give it a Sonic twist. But these feel pulled right out of Super Mario 3D World. And all of this was on full display in the marketing. None of that Sonic edge was there. Even the music sounded more Mario-like with not a single vocal track in sight. Just have a listen to the main theme. This was undoubtedly a Sonic game trying to appeal to Mario fans. Following that, Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric, which was an odd one. With Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric, Sega were not only trying to market a new game, but also trying to establish this new incarnation of what a Sonic game could be. With that, we saw more inspiration from Jak and Daxter and Ratchet & Clank, with it marketing itself as more of a slower-paced, sprawling open 3D platform with combat mechanics. We also had a focus on multiple playable characters, a little bit like Ratchet & Clank All for One. This is an odd one though, simply because this was released during a very quiet period for the Ratchet & Clank series, and Jak and Daxter had long since faded into irrelevancy. Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric's biggest problem upon its release was that it was so divorced from the high-energy gameplay you'd expect in a Sonic game, and too much like a low-quality Jak and Daxter clone. But what's so strange is that Sonic was aping a franchise that had less relevancy than Sonic, while missing what made Sonic, Sonic. I have no idea what they were going for with this, even though I actually think the game it's okay. Not in the slightest deserving of its, worst of all time reputation or anything like that, but that's a different subject. We've then got Sonic Forces, which was the first Sonic game since Sonic Generations 6 years prior to release on Xbox and PlayStation. Now, the way this game was being advertised seemed to be leaning way more into the Sonic sensibilities, but it's not like the inspirations weren't there. With Sonic Forces, we're back to Sonic having an edge again, more cinematically inclined. We've got a focus on story, with the game even having its own devoted story trailer. One of the things they led the marketing with was the instrumental of the main vocal theme, Fist Bump, which brought back the rock music, and all of the Sonic characters you could shake a stick at were in tow, plus all of your favorite villains and Zavok. You can even live out your dreams of playing as your Sonic OC and being besties with the Hedgehog himself. This Sonic game was clearly targeting long-term fans, and the reason for this is because of what happened with Sonic Boom and its poor reception. This was trying everything in its power to assert that Sonic is back to the status quo. This one will be as Sonic as it gets. This one is for the fans. With that said, there is another audience that they are trying to target. It's very apparent that they are leaning far more into a war vibe for Sonic Forces. I mean, obviously, the story takes place during Eggman's all-out assault on the world, but you've even got a trailer that begins with Knuckles talking all about the war down a walkie-talkie and the Avatar running around with a flamethrower.
If anyone can hear this, we're almost out of time. Our cities are falling. The world is being conquered by Dr. Eggman.
Weapons don't have instincts. Weapons don't have loyalty. Weapons don't have judgment.
This was clearly Sonic's way of appealing to fans of war games, which is kind of funny considering this was in the period when first-person shooter popularity was gradually dying down just a little. But for the first foray into PS4 and Xbox One, I can see sense in this, and it is one that suits Sonic. This is more of an instance of a Sonic game fitting into a specific genre than it is outright trying its hardest to appeal to fans of a particular game. Funny enough though, during development the game was very Star Wars inspired, to the extent that the game's original working title was Sonic Wars, and well, in a few levels I guess I can certainly see that inspiration. Now, obviously, Sonic Forces was trying to appeal to long-term Sonic fans as well as younger players more into gun games, and on paper, I'd say this is one of the better marketing cycles Sonic has seen. I was captivated by this. The problem is, it didn't really represent the game. The cinematic vibe and marketing this as a story-based game definitely didn't represent the end product with its 20 minutes worth of cutscenes. A lot of the cinematic action beats we were seeing in the trailer came from QTEs, and the high stakes that were advertised were just non-existent. Then marketing this alliance of Sonic villains that we saw in the E3 trailer, when Chaos and Shadow didn't even get a boss fight, nor did any of these characters, aside from Infinite, play any substantial role in the story, was, again, pretty deceptive. The way this game was being presented in the run-up was hitting all the right notes. It's just a real shame that the game wasn't really what it was advertised to be. An instance of the marketing being better than the actual product. Longtime Sonic fans were left disappointed by how superficial all that fan service ended up being, and this was nowhere near violent or mature enough for the Call of Duty addicted youth. So, are we noticing a pattern here? Sonic during this period was leaning far more into what made Sonic similar to other popular games in a bid to appeal to fans of those games, instead of showcasing what makes Sonic unique like the 90s and 2000s did. So now I'm going to talk about Sonic Frontiers, and for the most part it goes without saying. You could see exactly who Sega wanted to appeal to with this. It's so Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild coded. It's an open world game, but at the start of the marketing the focus was primarily on this big world that Sonic would get to explore. We had the ruins of an old civilization, towers you could climb, ancient glyphs, just a lot of grass and rocks, and yeah, again, obviously very Breath of the Wild inspired here. The story has Sonic exploring the remains of an ancient civilization following Cataclysm. We've got Coco to collect. The Blood Moon, or should I say, Starfall. And we didn't get to see any gameplay until 3 trailers in, and when we did, it was focused primarily on walking and puzzles. We had soft ambient piano music as opposed to the high energy music that Sonic is a bit more known for as well. And from the looks of things, Sega had quite literally just copied elements of Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild without really taking the Sonic of it all into consideration. And people noticed. Sega's little game of copying their contemporaries' homework had become just a bit too obvious with Sonic Frontiers' early marketing, and the reception was pretty poor. Now, I don't know if this was a reaction to the reception of the game's marketing, but a turning point occurred during the later stages of Sonic Frontiers' marketing. The focus shifted from it leaning into Breath of the Wild sensibilities more to Sonic Frontiers as a power fantasy, as trailers focused more on Sonic tearing through enemies and running around, like you'd want him to. But the music was also much higher energy, showcasing vocal themes I'm Here by Mary Kirk Holmes and Tomoe Otani, and Vandalize by One OK Rock. These tracks bringing modern Sonic back to his hard rock roots with some of the heaviest rock the franchise has seen. This felt like a return to form for Sonic marketing, a focus on all-out action, cinematic combat moves, and that edginess was back. And they were actually kinda honest about it this time, unlike Sonic Forces. The game releases, and it's a smash hit for its fun movement system and exhilarating combat, and even if it's a little undercooked, it definitely brings a cinematic quality back to Sonic. But it's funny because it's not like the game massively changed. The focus of the marketing just kind of changed from leaning more into the Breath of the Wild side, with the mysterious ruins and puzzles, to more into the Sonic side with the rock music-fueled power fantasy. The game reflected both sides of this, and the weaker aspects of the game were where they just drew inspiration from Breath of the Wild without really considering how to properly give it a Sonic identity, such as the open world's appearance, which just felt like someone took one look at Hyrule in Breath of the Wild and said, okay, let's remake that in Unreal Engine with stock assets. Sonic Frontiers succeeded where it was taking pride in just being Sonic, rather than desperately trying to say, look, this is just like Breath of the Wild. And then with the success of Sonic Frontiers, DLC came in tow, including a story expansion, which also had its very own trailers, which were nothing like the earlier trailers for Sonic Frontiers, once again leaning into the action side. Look at the promotion for Final Horizon, and we are definitely looking at more of an evolution of the 2000s style of Sonic marketing.
I think our opponent has repurposed the constructs to bolster the distortion's defensive measures. In other words, keep smashing things.
I like the direct approach.
It's all high-energy spectacle. So Sonic Frontiers, in a way, midway through its production cycle, kind of represented a turning point in how Sonic games are presenting themselves. We started to get back in touch with what makes Sonic different rather than what makes Sonic similar. That's not to say that there aren't some outliers in this era. Sonic Generations across the board marketed itself purely as a Sonic experience, but then again, I don't know how else you'd really market that game, considering it consists exclusively of content from previous Sonic games reworked for a new experience. We had two Sonics skating their way down San Francisco set to Green Day music, rather than Escape from the City, which was a choice, but hey, as a celebration of the franchise, I have no idea how else you'd market this than leaning into the Sonic. Another outlier was Sonic Mania, which, even when it wasn't showcasing locations we'd seen before, was just drenched in that 90s Art Deco that defined the classic Sonic art style, complete with high-energy music and animations by Tyson Hesse that evokes similar vibes to the Toei animations in Sonic CD. And then you've got Sonic Superstars, which decided to market itself as a couch co-op family game, which was a mistake because the co-op in that game is borderline unplayable. However, it also leans a little into the nostalgic, as its first trailer begins with Sonic 2 gameplay before transitioning into Sonic Superstars, complete with retro-style music harkening back to the 8-bit sound, which is weird as Sonic nostalgia is a bit more synonymous with 16-bit, but go off trailer. I also think that the promotion for the second and third Sonic movie have very much tapped into what this franchise is all about and what makes it different from its contemporaries. If Sonic 1 was kind of Alvin and the Chipmunks, but better, the marketing for Sonic 2 and Sonic 3 is kind of like Alvin and the Chipmunks, but it's now action-focused and a bit more serious and a little bit more edgy. It was funny when we got the trailer at the Game Awards for Sonic 2, followed by the trailer for Sonic Frontiers, and Sonic 2 clearly really understood the appeal of Sonic, while Sonic Frontiers clearly tried to understand the appeal of Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. But okay, from this I've drawn up a spectrum. On the far left of this spectrum, we've got the games that led with the Sonic nostalgia. This is where you've got your Sonic Generations, your Sonic Mania, and you know what? I'll throw in Superstars for good measure, despite the game marketing itself as a co-op game primarily because it was still pretty quintessentially classic Sonic. These are the games that undeniably advertise themselves purely as Sonic games and are leaning into the nostalgia of it all. It definitely makes sense for Sonic Generations and Sonic Mania because that's a focus of those games. Then on the right of that spectrum, we've got Sonic games that are clearly inspired by other games and share a few traits, but they are still predominantly Sonic. This is where your Sonic Colors and Sonic Forces go. Then on the far right end of the spectrum, you've got what I call the symbiotic Sonic games. Sonic games that have immediately attached themselves to the identity of another game. This is where your Sonic Lost World, Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric go, with Sonic Frontiers effectively being ping-ponged between the two opposing sides of the spectrum. Now, the most well-regarded games of this selection were Sonic Colors, Sonic Generations, Sonic Mania, and Sonic Frontiers. 2 out of 4 of these leaned into the Sonic identity to a nostalgic extent, those being Generations and Mania. Sonic Colors was fairly moderate with its inspiration when compared to Sonic Lost World, and Sonic Frontiers' reputation only really started to turn around for the better during its marketing when they started leaning into more the Sonic side of things rather than Breath of the Wild. It's quite clear to see that Sonic games tend to be a bit more successful when they are presented as Sonic games. People respond better to the marketing of this franchise when they're not trying to be so symbiotic of other games. Now, unfortunately, all of the examples of Sonic games that marketed themselves as Sonic games, though, have been more nostalgia-based games, anniversary games. I feel like we need new, fresh, original Sonic games that kind of market themselves with the confidence that these anniversary nostalgia games do. So okay, let's get up to date. Sonic X Shadow Generations releases next month. And okay, as a remaster, naturally a lot of its marketing carries over from the original Sonic Generations. However, unlike, say, Sonic Colors Ultimate, Sonic X Shadow Generations is advertised primarily based on its new content, that being the Shadow story. Shadow Generations does the Sonic Generations things of bringing back old zones and boss fights, while dipping its toes into the open zone format of Sonic Frontiers with its hub world. But there's no Breath of the Wild influence on display here, not even in the open zone. There's no Mario influence at all, no Ratchet and Clank, no Call of Duty. We've got a big focus on action and cinematic spectacle, high stakes, high intensity, and with Shadow taking center stage and Black Doom as the main antagonist, there's naturally the assumption that this is going to be a somewhat more narrative-focused game. We've got remixes of existing Sonic tracks in a rock and EDM hybrid style, and this seems to be taking itself very seriously. With Shadow at the forefront, naturally things like an intense tone are going to come naturally, but the marketing of Shadow Generations really showcases what we need to see with Sonic marketing from here on. From the jump, this displayed an action-centric mascot platformer with an edge to it. In many ways, Shadow's existence epitomizes Sonic's brand identity. What makes Sonic unlike other mascot platformers, and in the eyes of the fans better than other mascot platformers, is that difference in tone and intensity. Shadow Generations' marketing captures Sonic as an explosive power fantasy beautifully. Future Sonic games marketing should be closer in tone to this, confident in the Sonic IP and not bending over backwards to try to appeal to fans of other franchises, but instead showing fans of those other franchises what makes Sonic so special. And you could say, well, the marketing is like this because it's a Shadow-centric game, but really, the only difference between Sonic and Shadow in this particular context is that Sonic is blazing through all those high-octane thrills with a cheeky smile on his face, while Shadow is just kinda going through it. It's helped by the fact that Shadow Generations appears to be a well-crafted game with great level design and a lot more polished than us Sonic fans are really used to. I hope. But I think the main reason why every piece of marketing for this one has been so well received is because of that confidence in the Sonic franchise that Shadow Generations showcases. Shadow Generations is still ultimately, in some regard, kind of a nostalgia game, but they're not leaning into that so much with the marketing. There's no classic Sonic in here, no Green Hill or Chemical Plant. They've moved away from some of the more recognizable Sonic locales, tapping into a more niche side of Sonic history. But at the forefront of the marketing here is Shadow and the kind of tone that he brings along with him, and I think we need that for future Sonic games. That next mainline game, that Sonic Frontiers 2, needs to lead with it as a Sonic game. I don't want to see any obvious inspiration from other titles going forward. Because with that always comes the question, have they understood what made that great, and have they understood what will make that work with Sonic? And more often than not, the answer to that has been no. With the popularity of games like Sonic Frontiers, and hopefully Sonic X Shadow Generations, I think Sega can afford more and more to lean into the Sonic of it all, and I hope they will. I understand the desire to appeal to fans of other franchises, but there's a reason why Sonic fans are Sonic fans, and it's not because these games were like Super Mario Galaxy. It's because these games were Sonic games. Mario fans don't need another Mario. Breath of the Wild fans don't need another Link. Sega needs to just put Sonic out there for the world to see as he is, be honest about him, and I think the fans of games like Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Galaxy will see, hey, this is something different, I'll try it out. Keep up this positive momentum from the marketing campaign of Shadow Generations, and I think things can only go well. But what do you guys think? What do you think is one of the better marketing campaigns in Sonic history? Comment below, discuss. And as always, if you enjoyed this video and you want to support more like it, be sure to hit subscribe, hit the like button, and in the description below is the link to my Patreon page, where for as little as $1 a month, you can get your name in the credits of these videos, with a special shout out going to the patrons in the $5 and above tier. They are Chohenshin, KB, RT0, Carl-X, Hypes, Sad Goku, Daredenny, SSS06, Kale Bennett, Ken K, Mr. SP, Cyrus the Skeptic, Biotin, oh no, I've used up all of the helium, what am I meant to do now? And Vera Wild. Thank you good folks so much for your generosity, and to those of you at home watching, thank you so much for doing so, and have a great day. Now get out of here.